I'm Mia Langford, 24 years old, raised in a quiet town near Boise, Idaho, where summers stretched endlessly and people still greeted each other by name and last semester's GP. No one ever looked at my family and thought something was off. A two-story cream-colored house with a neatly trimmed lawn for bedrooms, and a shiny SUV always parked out front. My dad, Bradley Langford, was the deputy director of an agricultural equipment company, and my mom, Denise, ran a small flower shop. From the outside, we had all the pieces of a picture-perfect family. But I was never an essential piece of that picture. My older brother, Zach, 2 years ahead of me, was my mom's golden boy. Dad used to pat him on the back and tell his buddies, "This one's taking over for me, no doubt." As for me, I was the easy child. The way they said it made it sound like I was some low-maintenance appliance that just worked quietly in the corner. I remember being 8 and staying up 2 nights straight to finish a large watercolor painting of our backyard garden for the county art show. I shaded every leaf, outlined every stone on the walkway. Out of more than 200 entries, I placed third. My teacher even asked me to give a short speech on stage. But that morning my parents didn't show up. I had called the night before. Mom said, "If it doesn't conflict with Zach's game, I'll stop by." Turned out he had a scrimmage that day, so they chose bleachers over auditorium seats. I stood alone with the certificate quietly in my hand, watching other parents clap and cheer for their kids, my throat dry like dust. That evening I placed the certificate on the dining table, hoping they'd see it. But after Zach retold his last-minute game-winning shot, Mom threw her arms around him, exclaiming, "You're my little warrior." The next morning, my award was pushed aside under the cereal box and a stack of utility bills. By the time I was 12, the divide was too obvious to pretend it didn't exist. Zach's 13th birthday was held at a major recreation center in Spokane. There were mobile video game trucks, a 3-tier cake, even a guy dressed up as a superhero. I remember because I was assigned to take photos and wasn't allowed to touch the cake until guests had their share. My own 13th? A dinner at the local diner. Mom said, "Mia doesn't like big parties, she's simple." I never complained. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned to keep quiet so I wouldn't upset anyone. But silence doesn't mean blindness. Zach got private guitar lessons, attended a robotic summer camp that cost thousands. I wanted to learn digital design, but Mom said the software was too expensive. And besides, it's just doodling. Then came my 16th birthday, a milestone every American kid dreams of as their first taste of freedom. That morning, I came downstairs in an old button-up shirt, heart pounding. When Zach turned 16, Dad had secretly refurbished an old Jeep for him, wrapped in a red bow. Mom cried from excitement. I got an envelope. Inside was a city bus schedule and a handwritten note from Mom. "We believe you're mature enough to find your own way. Show us you truly deserve independence." I nodded, smiled, and thanked them with a voice barely louder than the breeze over a lake. But something inside me cracked quietly. A light drizzle fell that day. Zach drove his friends around town in the Jeep, blasting music loud enough for me to hear from my room. I took my bus schedule to the nearest stop, waited nearly 40 minutes in the cold for the only bus that would get me to the library. I wanted to borrow a Photoshop tutorial book. No one asked where I went. No one noticed I skipped dinner. I never wanted a crown. I just dreamed maybe once they'd turn and say, "Mia, we're proud of you." That never happened. So I walked another path. Alone. No one waved me off. No one looked back. But I kept walking. And someday they'll have no choice but to turn around, because the girl they once ignored will become someone impossible to overlook. I started babysitting at 13, not out of some brave need to be independent, but because I knew no one else would plan for my future. Our family had plenty, but that plenty revolved around one person. When Zach asked for an electric drum kit, Mom agreed immediately. I asked if I could take digital drawing classes. She shook her head and said, "You should focus on something practical. Don't waste time on fluff." Every night after school and exhausting babysitting shifts, I'd head to the public library to learn Photoshop on those old computers. I printed out tutorials, tucked them into a file folder since we didn't have a home computer. After the library closed, I'd borrow books, sketch ideas on printer paper. Even after lights out, I stayed up with my tiny desk lamp, drawing with a $10 secondhand wireless mouse. No iPad. No stylus. No paid design courses. But I had persistence. A persistence born from years of sitting on the bleachers, cheering for victories I had no part in. At 15, I asked Mom if I could work at the nearby bakery. She frowned, asking if I needed more allowance. I just said, I want to save for college. She said nothing, just gave me that look like I'd said something unnecessary. I worked anyway. 3 shifts a week. Low pay, but after 2 years I'd saved enough to buy a used laptop I found on Craigslist. The C key stuck, the fan sounded like a lawn mower, but it ran the software. That was enough. I spent all of that summer at 17 building a portfolio for a design school in California I'd dreamed of. While Zach vacationed in Hawaii with his friends to find himself, I slept 3 hours a night, tweaking every pixel on posters I built from scattered ideas that came to me while washing dishes. I got accepted into the Visual Design Institute in San Francisco. Partial scholarship. When the email came from financial aid, my hands trembled. That evening, I printed the acceptance letter, slipped it into a folder, and headed to the kitchen to share the news. Zach was at the dinner table telling our parents about his new startup idea, an app that rated coffee by region. He had just dropped out of his second year at business school to follow his passion. Mom refilled his orange juice, eyes glowing like he'd invented the internet. I stood there holding my folder. I got my acceptance letter, I said, gently sliding the folder onto the table. My dad didn't even glance at the paper. He just asked, "How are you planning to pay for it?" My mom chimed in, her tone as casual as if she were discussing an overpriced item. "You could take out a loan. And who knows if that school's even the right fit. There are graphic design programs here too." I froze. They didn't ask why I chose that school. Didn't ask what I had to do to get in. I just nodded, quietly pulled the folder back. A week later, I got a letter from the financial aid office. My family's contribution had been denied, and the tuition fund wouldn't cover the remainder. I called the school to ask why. "We've been informed that the parental fund you listed is no longer available," the staff member said. "They stated it was used for private investment and is not recoverable." I couldn't breathe. That night when I confronted them, my mom stared at the kitchen floor, avoiding my eyes. "Zach needs capital to launch his company," she said softly. "This is his shot. You can get a loan, right? You have good grades." I don't remember what I said next. I just remember running upstairs, biting my lip until it bled so I wouldn't scream. I tore down all my posters. Folded up the sketches and design samples I once thought were my bridge to another future. That bridge had been dismantled by the very people who should have helped me cross it. I chose to attend Idaho State University, where I could take general ed classes for a cheaper rate, and started working full-time at the campus bookstore to pay tuition semester by semester. Meanwhile, Zach bounced from one startup to the next like changing shirts. Each time he failed, my mom would say, "It was a great idea, just bad timing." My dad would shrug. "Every entrepreneur stumbles a few times." I used to dream they'd look at me the way they looked at Zach. Not anymore. I stopped waiting for praise or concern. All I needed was a chance, even if I had to carve it from stone with my own hands. Because I understood something clearly. If I wanted not to be forgotten, I had to create something they couldn't ignore. Even if that meant starting from the basement of a library. I left home at 19 on a cold afternoon in March, with 3 suitcases of clothes, a beat-up laptop, and $600 I had saved all summer. No one saw me off. No goodbyes. My mom looked out the window. My dad stayed silent as if my presence took up too much space. The room I found was on the 3rd floor of a brown brick walk-up on the eastern edge of Spokane, the kind of place real estate agents called up and coming to hide peeling paint and late-night sirens. The carpeted stairs were musty, the lock barely held, and the bathroom was so cramped I had to press against the wall just to shut the door. I got a morning barista job at Willow Bean, a tiny cafe next to a used bookstore, where the scent of waffles lingered in the air before sunrise. The alarm rang at 4:30 and I left the house while the city was still wrapped in fog. My shift ended at midday, hands red from espresso steam, feet numb from hours of standing. But the regulars were kind and I learned how to smile even when I felt hollow. After a quick break, I'd switch uniforms, shove my cap into my backpack and start job number 2, delivering for a Thai place called Chow Praya. The car I drove was a 2003 Subaru. No AC brake screeching. The passenger seat held takeout containers, gloves, and a damp jacket. Some nights, I'd deliver to gated communities where people barely looked up, let alone said thank you. Tips were unpredictable. There were nights I ran almost 10 deliveries and went home with $18, barely enough for 3 packs of ramen and a roll of toilet paper. The first few weeks, I convinced myself I was taking charge of my life. But by month 3, with bruised eyes, a dull ache in my back, and a mailbox full of overdue tuition notices, it felt more like drowning in wet cement. There was no washer in my apartment, so every Saturday I hauled laundry to the laundromat, huddled on plastic chairs watching machines spin. I scribbled design notes into a worn notebook, telling myself one day they'd turn into real projects. I cooked on a hot plate, mostly brown rice with boiled eggs. On nights I couldn't afford vegetables, I ate dry bread with peanut butter borrowed from my roommate, leaving a sticky note that read, "Pay you back tomorrow." By month's end, when my bank account hit $6.14, I finally knew what true hunger felt like. My mom still called weekly. But instead of, "How are you doing?" the opening line was often, "Zach's working on an app to connect homegrown organic plant sellers. Think you could help him make a logo?" Or, "Your dad just gave Zach more funds to run ads. But he's low on cash. Got a bit to lend him just temporarily?" I used to lie. "Yeah, I'm fine. I've got work." Then hang up, curl into a corner of the room and sob silently into my raincoat. One night I got an order to West Hill. It was raining and cold, roads slick. My car's oil was low, check engine light had been on for 2 weeks. At the door, the customer grabbed their food without noticing I was soaked head to toe. "No thank you." Just a nod and a shut door. I got back in the car, shivering, trying to turn on the heat. Only a faint breath of warmth came out. I sat there, fingers gripping the wheel, thinking about Zach, working on his Go Green with Zach project backed by my parents with his own office downtown. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Greasy hair. Frayed coat. Heavy under-eye circles. A faint snap. The food container had burst open. White rice spilled across the seat, mixing with curry sauce on the floor mat. I didn't scream. Didn't hit anything. I just sat there, feeling like someone had switched off the light in my brain. That night, back at the apartment, the room's light flickered from a faulty outlet. My roommate was asleep with headphones in, unaware I'd returned. I lay down on the mattress on the floor. No blanket, no pillow. Eyes closed, I whispered one question to myself. Am I even still alive? No answer. But I knew, if I didn't wake up for work the next morning, no one would notice. And maybe that was the scariest part of all. That night, rain poured over the city like someone was shaking out the sky. My last delivery sent me driving through North Ridge, a neighborhood filled with sprawling wooden homes, garden lights glowing like wedding receptions, and stone walkways so spotless the tires barely caught any mud. I stood outside the wrought iron gate of number 3112, holding a pizza box dripping from the bottom. The thin raincoat clung to my skin, my hair was plastered to the back of my neck, and my shoes were soaked through. No one answered the doorbell. I was about to call the number when the door creaked open and a middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped out, holding a large umbrella. The walkway light cast half his face in a soft glow. He looked at me for a moment, brow furrowed, tilting his head like he was matching me to a distant memory. "Mia Langford." I stepped back half an inch, startled. "You are?" "I'm Vince," the man said, his voice low but warm. "Your father's brother." My body froze, blood turning cold. Name. I hadn't heard it since I was 13. In my house, the name Vince had been scrubbed from every photo and conversation, like he'd never existed. Uncle Vince. I gripped the pizza box, unsure whether to drop it or run. He stepped closer, holding the umbrella over both of us. "You're delivering here?" I nodded slightly, caught between confusion and resentment. "I work 2 jobs, I said. Barista in the morning, delivery at night. Not exactly rock bottom, right? He stared at me a little longer. Not with pity. More like someone reading a book left unfinished for too long. "Come inside," he said. "Just for a few minutes. I don't want to leave you standing in this rain." I almost said no. Part of me still heard my father's sharp voice. "Never speak that name in this house." But the cold rain, the empty stomach, the shoes that felt like bricks, made me nod. Inside, the house was spacious but not flashy, furnished with warm oak and soft amber lighting. A group of people chatted in the living room, paying no attention to me. Vince led me into the kitchen, handed me a towel, and made me a cup of hot cocoa. You were always good at drawing, he said as I dried my hair. I still have the sketch you gave me for my birthday when you were 12. A calico cat lying on a bookshelf. Remember that? My heart paused. No one had ever brought that up, not even Mom. I sipped the cocoa, waiting. Finally, Vince set down his cup and spoke gently. I run a small company that builds visual platforms for medical applications. We're always looking for young designers with taste and grit. Like you. I set my cup down. What are you trying to do? Bring me back so Dad can glare at me and say I've been manipulated? Vince didn't react. He quietly pulled out a business card from his wallet. I'm not going back to that family. I've come too far to live a lie again. But if you want a shot at being seen for who you are, not what you're not, this is an open door. I looked down at the pristine card, black lettering that read, Vince Langford, Hughes Nova Systems. I don't want special treatment, I said, my voice firm as steel. I won't be anyone's boss's niece. He smiled. Good. Because at Nova I don't hire nieces. I hire people with talent. I won't kiss up. I don't like kiss-ups. We sat in silence. Outside, the rain hammered the porch roof. As I stepped out, I paused at the threshold. If I show up for an interview, it's because I earned it. Not because of blood ties. Vince nodded, his eyes holding something I couldn't name. I'm just offering you the door, he said. You'll have to walk through it yourself. I walked away, the card tucked into the inside pocket of my raincoat, trembling slightly in my hand. That night I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop, pulled up old designs, updated my portfolio piece by piece, polished my resume down to every detail. On screen, the work I once crafted under a flickering dorm light suddenly looked different, like it was demanding to be taken seriously. 3 days later, I called the number on the card. The assistant answered politely, asked if I could come in Thursday at 10 in the morning. I looked at the note taped to the fridge. Willow shift from 6:30 to 2. I inhaled deeply. Yes. I'll be there. The glass elevator stopped at the 27th floor of Nova Systems. The doors opened to a pale gray carpeted hallway, frosted glass walls etched with wave patterns. I straightened my collar, gripped the portfolio like it was the only thing keeping me upright. At the end of the hall, a small steel plaque read, Director of Design, Jacqueline Torres. I knocked twice. A woman's voice answered, calm, neither harsh nor soft. Come in. Jacqueline, the one LinkedIn dubbed Nova Steel Eyes, sat straight at the conference table, flipping through documents. Her short black hair framed sharp features, glasses thin as wire, gaze even sharper. Have a seat, Mia, she said without looking up. Vince tells me you're self-taught, no formal training? I nodded. I learned through free resources and public libraries. Bold. Also reckless. She looked up. Let's hope your risk matches your skill. I placed my portfolio on the table. She opened it, flipped through fast, stopping at the branding concept for a Spokane bakery. Her eyes narrowed. Font choice is too safe. But the way you handled color, tight. I stayed silent. You can start an internship Monday, 9 a.m. 3 months. It's paid but not much. Real work. No coffee runs, no printing. You prove yourself, you stay. If not, the door's right there. I nodded. I'm not here for favors. Lucky for you, I don't hand them out. She stood. Monday. Don't be late. That night, I called the manager at Willow Bean. Nick was silent for a moment after I explained. Then he said, if you ever need to come back for weekend shifts, just call. You deserve to move forward. I put the phone down, my heart both heavy as stone and light as smoke. I kept delivering for the Thai restaurant for another week, just enough to cover next month's rent. Then I wrote my resignation, folded up my uniform into a cardboard box, and set it beside a case of instant noodles. On my first day at Nova, I wore a white button-down, perfectly pressed, and polished a pair of second-hand shoes until they gleamed. The office was open. No cubicles, just greenery and whiteboards filled with ideas. No small talk. No unnecessary questions. Jacqueline walked me to my desk, right next to a designer named Kira, granite-colored hair, 3 earrings in one ear. Observe, take notes, ask if you must. Don't guess, Kira said when she saw me pull out my notebook. No one here has time to fix your mistakes. I didn't guess. I learned. Every lunch break, instead of scrolling my phone, I reviewed past designs, noting every tweak they made. At night, I read up on color systems, typography, and user experience. 3 weeks in, I was assigned to adjust a secondary interface for a health tracking app. Kira reviewed every screen I built, not letting a 2-pixel misalignment slide. Not cohesive. Do it again. So I did. 13 times. One evening, as I stayed late reworking the layout, Vince stopped by. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He just set a cup of ginger tea on the table and walked away. Week 6, Jacqueline called me into the meeting room. Want to try leading a real project? I sat up. Depends on the scope. Rebranding for Starlin Health's pharmacy chain. The project's been delayed twice. Previous designs were too bland. I want to see what you can bring. There'll be supervision, but the core concept is yours. I took the brief. My pulse went wild. That night I skipped dinner. Spread out sheets of paper on the floor, placed the current logo in the center. The pale blue was too weak. The font lacked weight. The leaf symbol, generic. I started sketching. Italicized lettering for a sense of motion, lemon yellow for vitality and trust. I added 2 intersecting lines, symbolizing connection between people and healthcare. 3 days later, I presented the concept. Jacqueline studied it silent for 30 seconds. Then she looked up. Memorable. Strong. Clean. Needs spacing tweaks, but there's potential. The design moved on to A/B testing. 3 weeks later, brand recognition went up by 17%. Starlin signed on for another 6 months. Kira gave me a half pat on the shoulder. Not bad, rookie. That day, I walked out of the office before sunset. For the first time in 2 years, I called my mom, just to say, I just finished a real brand design project. Real client. Good feedback. My mom replied, her tone flat as overnight tea. Oh, sounds fine. I didn't feel hurt. Or disappointed. I simply smiled, slipped the phone into my pocket and kept walking to the bus stop. In my hand wasn't a logo. It was the feeling of someone who no longer needed anyone's approval to feel worthy. Friday afternoon, I got a text from Mom. Come home for dinner Sunday. We need to talk. Your dad said don't be late. No emojis. No, love you. No asking if I was free. Same tone as always, like my presence was an obligation I owed. I thought about it for 2 days. Not because I was unsure, but because I was arranging in my head what needed to be said. The old house still sat at the corner of Timber Ridge. The maple trees on both sides of the street had turned wine red. I parked at the gate, turned off the engine, and took a deep breath. Inside, my dad was flipping steaks in the backyard, button-down shirt crisp as ever. Mom was fussing over glasses at the dinner table. Zach sat with his legs crossed on the couch, a shiny new watch peeking from under his rolled-up sleeve. When he saw me, he smiled like we hadn't lived in separate worlds. Heard you're working near Uncle Vince's place? He said, raising an eyebrow. Nice. I didn't reply. Just took off my coat, folded it neatly, and set it on the chair beside me. During dinner, they talked about Zach's latest startup, a seasonal plant care subscription called Green Loop. Mom nodded approvingly. Dad mused, solid concept. I added more greens to my plate. Stayed quiet. At the end of the meal, Mom spoke up. Zach's having a bit of trouble with his second funding round. The financial firm backed out, markets tightening. I paused my utensils. I didn't need to hear more to know what was coming. Do you have anything to spare? She continued. I mean, if you could loan some just to help him through this patch. Zach leaned back, shrugged like it was no big deal. I dabbed my mouth, set the napkin on my lap. No. No one moved. Just the ticking of the wall clock. Dad tilted his head slightly. Why the harsh tone? I met his eyes. Because I once had to live off $43 a month. While Zach replaced laptops 3 times, I begged roommates for hand-me-downs. When I needed tuition, you said there was no money, then handed it all to his golden idea. Mom placed a gentle hand on the table. That's the past, Mia. I cut in. The past decided the rest of my life. Zach scowled. You're overreacting. No one forced you to struggle. I turned to him, voice steady. You were handed everything. I juggled 2 jobs, ate ramen for 3 meals, just to keep a roof over my dream. Dad leaned heavily against his chair. We weren't playing favorites. You chose that path. I gave a small laugh without warmth. Really? Then who told me you're independent, you don't need a birthday party? Who used my college fund to invest in Zach's app without asking me? Who skipped my award ceremony but made it to every single one of his school games? Mom lowered her head. No one said a word. That evening, I stood up and pulled an old photocopy from my jacket pocket. It was a printed email Vince had sent 6 years ago, offering to cover my tuition in place of my parents. I found this in an old mailbox. I never saw it before. Why? My mom looked up, her lips trembling. My dad stayed silent. Why didn't you tell me someone wanted to help? Why keep it from me? Asked my voice low. My dad pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead. Vince just wanted to show off. That's what he always does, always trying to prove he's right. I didn't need his charity. It wasn't charity, I replied. It was a chance for me to study without debt. But you took it away for pride. My mom placed her hand on mine, whispering like a confession. When you were born, your father hoped for a boy. He already had a name, a room, even a football plan ready. When he found out you were a girl, he was disappointed. I saw it. I tried to make up for it by giving Zach everything, hoping your father would let it go. My chest tightened. I turned to my dad. What did you say to Mom when I was born? He didn't answer. His eyes backed away like a child caught in a lie. I took a deep breath and stepped back. I don't blame either of you for what I went through. But from now on, any help I give will have clear terms. No more one-sided, supporting the family. No one gets priority just because their last name is Langford. I pulled out my wallet and left enough cash to cover my dinner. Then I walked to the door, no rush, no glance back. Behind me, Zach stayed quiet. My mom sobbed. And my dad, he still didn't say a word. But maybe that was the clearest answer of all. 3 days after that dinner, tight as piano wire, my mom called. Her voice was unusually calm. Mia, your father. He won't say it, but he's panicking. The bank sent a past due notice. I could hear the sound of crumpling paper on the other end. She lowered her voice. If you're still willing to help, we need a real conversation. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with all 3 of them at the office of Lynn Harper, a financial restructuring advisor who had once worked with Vince to rescue a struggling small business. They sat across from me in a small oak-paneled conference room, soft light filtering through the window onto a table stacked with documents. Harper didn't sugarcoat it. You're behind on 3 months of mortgage payments, nearly maxed out your credit lines and have no cash reserves. Total debt, about $186,000, not including late fees. My mom said nothing. My dad clasped his hands, his face flushed like someone pulled into daylight too fast. I laid down a folder in front of them. I've put together a plan to help. But everything has to be transparent and binding. No more handouts just to check a box. I laid out 3 conditions. First, I would advance $42,000, my savings and bonus from the recent rebranding project. The amount would be formalized as a loan, with a 6-year term, low interest, fixed payments, and legal oversight. Second, Zach had to stop chasing startup ideas. I'd already reached out to a local marketing firm, Willow Insights, that needed a full-time content and client support coordinator. Training included. Third, the whole family had to commit to at least 3 months of family therapy. No skipping sessions, no just showing up. Kayla Novak, a neutral therapist, had agreed to work with us if everyone consented. My dad looked at me like I'd just flipped over the altar. You're turning your parents into a personal project? I held his gaze. No. I'm trying to stop this family from sinking. But if no one's willing to swim, I'm not pulling them out. Zach stood up, face red. I don't need you telling me how to live. I gave a dry smile. Really? Says the guy asking for money from the person who shouldn't tell him how to live? My mom tugged his sleeve, her eyes glassy. Zach, please listen. If you don't want to lose the house, this is the only path. Eventually, my father quietly signed the documents. No words, just a nod like he finally saw how badly the first move had failed. 1 week later, Zach started work at Willow Insights. On day 1, he texted me a photo of his desk with the caption, "Didn't get to start up, got told to start over." I didn't reply. But that night, another message arrived. Worked 8 straight hours without checking my phone. Feels weird. Family therapy began the following week. In the first session, my dad said nothing but his name. My mom avoided my eyes. Zach slumped down, glued to his screen. But dear. Novak wasn't easily fooled. I'm not here to referee. I'm here to cut the rot before it spreads to what's still good. By week 3, Zach admitted he felt afraid when no one praised him in the morning. In week 5, my mom broke down, saying she let me drift away just to keep Zach from collapsing. In week 8, my dad spoke slowly, each word dragged from stone. I'm sorry. You deserve to be valued from day one. I was blind, chasing a version of a son that never existed. I said nothing. But when the session ended, I slipped a note into his coat pocket. It had only one line. Being forgiven isn't being forgotten. It's being taught again from the beginning. Zach started arriving early to work. He volunteered for a small client project. 6 weeks later, his team lead told me he might have real potential, if he kept it up. As for my parents, they began making partial loan payments on schedule. Each one came with a handwritten note from Mom. Not long, not dramatic, but always enough to make me pause. I no longer needed them to love me the way they once loved Zach. I needed them to learn how to love fairly. And this time they were learning, bit by bit. As my family began rebuilding from the foundation up, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about rebuilding, but not with rotten wood. On a Monday morning at the end of October, I was called up to the 31st floor, the executive level of Nova Systems. The message came from Jacqueline Torres. Not a single wasted word. The conference room looked the same as always. Glass doors opening to a panoramic view of downtown, light glinting off the matte black table. Jacqueline stood by the window holding a thick gray folder. When I entered, she turned and placed it in front of me. Mia, she said without raising her voice. We'd like to bring you on full-time. Junior design strategist. The full offer's in here. You have 2 days to consider, but I hope you won't need more than 2 hours. I opened the folder. The number listed as the starting salary made my chest tighten. Not because it was high, but because I no longer had to count every penny on my debit card just to fill up my gas tank. Jacqueline nodded, arms crossed. You've gone further than most people expected. I used to think I wouldn't make it halfway, I answered, voice low but steady. 2 weeks later, I moved out of the cramped room that had once been my first shelter from the storm. My new apartment sat in a quiet South Hill neighborhood. High ceilings, polished hardwood floors, wide windows looking out to the park. Not luxurious, but every square foot was built from patience and refusal to give up. Next to my desk, I hung an old sketch print, creased paper now pressed behind glass, darkwood frame. It was the logo design for the first little bakery I ever emailed from a public library. At night, when the kitchen lights spill across the empty floor, I sit on the couch, sip tea and listen to soft jazz. No surprise knocks on the door, no one borrowing my bank card, no one asking why I'm still not married. I've started breathing in my own rhythm. Vince and my dad saw each other again on a Friday afternoon at a Nova product launch. They shook hands, didn't say much. But that night Vince texted me. Brothers don't need to forgive everything. Just learn how to sit beside each other without reopening the wound. That Thanksgiving I came home, at my mother's personal invitation. There was no grand feast. Just roast chicken, warm salad and a worn wooden table polished to a shine. Zach showed up late but brought wine and a pack of Uno cards. He didn't say anything when we saw each other, just reached out and patted my shoulder. Enough to know that even the deepest family conflict, if handled with truth and clear boundaries, can pass. When dessert was served, my father stood and pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket. I'm not good at saying things like this, he began, voice gravelly. But there's something I need to say, something I should have said 10 years ago. Everyone stopped eating. I didn't move. I'm sorry for not seeing you. For believing you didn't need protection the way Zach did. For letting expectations turn into injustice. Well, I see. Clearly. My mother placed her hand over his. No one else spoke, but the look around the table told me, what I once thought could never mend had started to come together. A few months later, Vince proposed that I take on a new role, program coordinator for a mentorship initiative in design, aimed at students from underprivileged backgrounds. You came out of the darkest room, he said. Now help others find the window. I accepted. In our first session, I met a freshman named Rory. Small frame, curly hair, a slight stutter, always clutching a notebook to their chest like a shield. They said, "I feel lost in class. Like everyone already knows what they're doing, and I'm just pretending I do." I smiled. "You're not alone. I once lived on instant noodles, delivered food through snow, and felt like a smudge mark in the whole system. But you know what?" Rory looked up, eyes just a little brighter. "All of that teaches you something no one else can: how to stand steady in chaos. Don't underestimate that." Mia's story isn't just about rising from injustice. It's living proof that true worth doesn't come from favoritism, but from resilience. From a girl overlooked by her own family, juggling 2 jobs to survive, Mia rose with talent and effort, reclaiming her voice and her dignity. She didn't just rebuild herself, she helped restore a broken family. That's the power of someone who dares to face truth, embrace change, and reject the roles others try to assign. What do you think about Mia's journey? Have you ever felt overlooked by your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories to come.